So for women that, maybe are coming up to the perimenopause, like let's really define what perimenopause is and the differences between the stages of it.
I think there's a good couple of years where women, the symptoms are so subtle that it just feels like a tiny exacerbation of everyday life. This is what I tell women, how to identify that you're in perimenopause. One, symptoms. We're going to evolve. Who you are is going to evolve. Who you are at the beginning of perimenopause, believe me, girl, is not going to be who you're going to be at the end of perimenopause. You know what I'm saying? And so, one, there's a level of surrender, right? Because I always say ownership is different than blaming ourselves. We've been taught to blame ourselves. That is not going to get us where we want to go. But ownership in this journey, that is going to set the course and set the tone for how we want to live our lives. Now is the new later, right? Women are like, now, I'm ready now. I want you to have everything that you need. You experience wins. I want you to have a win. I want you to have so many wins that you stay motivated, that you stay excited, and that you stay confident to continue to charter this path for yourself.
One of our most requested topics is perimenopause. Like, hands down, a week doesn't go by where somebody is in my DMs be like, hey, Katie, I don't have acne, but I'm going through perimenopause, or I have acne and I'm going through it as well. What resources do you have? Do you have podcast episodes? So we wanted to bring in like the expert when it comes to perimenopause. And I'm actually really excited because I got to be on Dr. Mariza Snyder's podcast just a few weeks ago. It was so fun. Yeah, like it just went live and we had such a great time. And I'm like, you need to come over and hang out with us. So like when I say she's a powerhouse when it comes to supporting women midlife, like this is what I'm saying. She has over 17 years as a practitioner, author, speaker. Her new book is actually coming out in October. We cannot wait. Chris is like already pre-ordered a copy for herself. She's even sparked this massive movement of women in perimenopause and beyond. And if you recognize her name, it could be from her top-rated podcast I just mentioned, Energized with Dr. Mariza, which has just like a casual 13 million downloads. Thriving social media community, more than 400,000 women all over the world. Her content's getting like 8 million views every single month. So like clearly she's striking a chord with how women are feeling right now and giving like that real science-backed solutions. Because when it comes to perimenopause and metabolic health, for so long, women have thought they've just had to be stuck with this. But Dr. Mariza, you're here to say you don't have to be stuck with this.
Exactly. That is exactly the message that I want women to get out of this conversation today, is that each and every one of us gets to rewrite our midlife story on our terms, especially when we have that knowledge. Like knowledge is power, particularly for women, right? Because we take action on that information. Like that's what I love about women. I always say I serve everybody by serving women. And I'll tell you what, when we step into our power in this transition, this window of opportunity, it transforms our family, our community, and ultimately it transforms the world. So this is the big work we get to do to help women feel alive in their body.
I can't agree more. We always say the same thing, that it really starts with women because we're the ones that are taking the initiative and we're setting example for our children, for our partners, for our friends, our family, whoever those important people in our lives are. And I don't think that women give themselves enough credit, because when you make that courageous and brave decision to take control of your own health, you're leading by example and you're creating a ripple effect that you probably don't even know is happening.
Yeah, a legacy. Probably one of the greatest legacies we can leave our family and the people in our lives that matter most is really prioritizing ourselves, honoring ourselves, because we are such important role models for how to live life. And so I agree. And women do not deserve to suffer needlessly. I think the myth that I want to dispel, that I was brought up with, is that menopause is the beginning of the end, or late perimenopause is like, there's this decline. And it was always just assumed that there was a decline, that there was nothing we could do about it. And it's so far from the truth. There's so much that we can do about it. That first thing that we do is decide. We get to decide. I remember my mom being 48 years old, being in what I call like the nightmare unfolding of perimenopause. She had every symptom, the worst of the symptoms. She was 49, 50 years old, and she was like, enough is enough. I'm not doing this. This is not my mama's menopause. I'm not going on the decline. And my mom decided, she'd always been in the gym her whole life. She'd always been physically active, but she wanted to anchor into something bigger than herself. And so she decided to train for the LA Marathon. Fast forward, she's 65 years old in October. So next month, she will be running her, 40th marathon. I have no idea at this point how many marathons it is, but she just was like, I'm doing this different. Okay, I'm going to have energy, capacity. She imagines that she's going to be the 80-year-old person that people see running, that they're going to be like, I want to be her. She decided at 50, it was like 49, 50, and she decided to do competitive tennis. So she's still a competitive tennis player. Both of these things happened at 50 years old. She completely reinvented. She got stronger, more resilient. Her metabolic markers look phenomenal. She looks like she's like literally less than 50 years old, and it's just been such an again, an inspiration for me for what is possible and how we can pivot and reclaim that second half of our lives.
For so many women, they get to that midlife, they're 45, they're 50, they're 55, they're like, oh, well, can't really do anything now. I should have started when I was 20, but it doesn't matter. But you can see that when you do take that control over and you make those changes, like you could be running marathons and being a competitive tennis player at 65. Like, I love that. So for you with this journey, is it your mom that really inspired you to go into this work, or did your own journey also inspire it?
My mom was the first person to really deeply inspire me. At the time that she was going through perimenopause, late, by the way, late perimenopause, full dismissal until she was like 47 years old, when she was having what I call the crime scene periods, right? That's when we're like, okay, crime scene periods, check. Low libido, check. Hot flashes, night sweats. This is what we consider to be menopause. You're skipping a period more than 60 days. And this is what the CDC calls perimenopause. We know that women have been in perimenopause. We assume that just because women have regular cycles, but they have a slew of other symptoms, that they're not in perimenopause. And so we were dismissing my mother and millions of other women. This is still happening today. I got a DM in my inbox, on my Instagram inbox today, where a woman went to her doctor. She's 44 years old. She's got severe brain-related perimenopausal symptoms. And he's like, your mom didn't go into menopause until she was 50. She's like, I'm diagnosing you with anxiety. Here's an SSRI. That is what she was told. And she's just like, she was so upset. And I was like, well, at least he's self-selected out. Like, he ain't your doctor. That ain't it. And so this is happening all the time. But I remember my mom being 47 and send me a sign, make it impossible for me to miss. Like that. Well, the woman was in perimenopause at this point. It was obvious. And she was going through a slew of brain-related symptoms, mood-related symptoms. She felt like her mental health was on the fritz. And I remember I had just been in practice for 2 years. This was 16 years ago. And I remember I having an entire practice full of midlife women. Some women were in peri, other women were in menopause, but even I wasn't really connecting the dots between the myriad of symptoms that were happening with my patients and it being declining hormones, erratic declining hormones. But then my mom, she gave me this front row seat in watching the mismanagement of her care. I was like, we have to do better. And I remember ultimately taking over her care around 48, 49 years old and like walking through the fire with her. And that was that defining moment where I was like, one, my practice already has midlife women in it. I now know what this really looks like. I got a front row view to it. We need to do better. And so every single day since 2010, I have been on this crusade to change the way that we take care of women in midlife. And then now I'm in it myself. And I'll be honest with you, it's been a very deeply transformative and deeply, I would say, destabilizing journey, especially as a mom to a young child. I kind of didn't have much of a gap between postpartum and perimenopause. And I think any of us that are having children a little bit later, there's a deniability that we're just, I don't know, maybe we're going to shove back perimenopause. I'm not exactly sure, but I know that when I started getting symptoms of peri, I still didn't even recognize it. I wasn't connecting the dots because it's so easy for us to want to go back to, oh, maybe this is stress, or maybe this is poor sleep, or maybe this is my thyroid acting up again. Like, what has come up for me in the past? Obviously, it can't be perimenopause. Like, I'm not there yet. And so that's the interesting thing about this journey is so often it doesn't announce itself, and it can feel like a lot of other things. When ultimately, when you start adding up those symptoms and tracking them against your cycle, you're like, oh, actually, this is perimenopause, and maybe the other things too.
Things start to go a little bit. And I have Hashimoto's. So for you, like
I
when
have
you,
Hashimoto's too.
oh
So
my
I was like, oh, it's
gosh.
my Hashimoto's. It's got to be
Yeah,
Hashimoto's.
I get it, right? And I was like, oh, you know what? I don't need these meds. I'm just gonna like reduce a little bit because the autoimmune, it's not to do with that. I'm doing so much better. Like, it was infrared sauning all the time. Everything was looking better. I tore my ATFL in May to the point that it was like full tear. And my goodness. Now, first of all, I'd like to say because I'm in the health field, I really love that I was able to, within 11 weeks, walk on it with a lot of stability. It's still a little wonky now. For everybody that doesn't know, you're talking 6 months to a year.
Yeah,
It was
of
rough.
recovery. Easily
Yeah.
6 months. That's what any
It's rough.
orthopedic surgeon will tell you.
I started noticing a little bit more there with my healing too. And I was like, okay, I'm doing pretty good. I couldn't get down to the sauna. The very first sauna after, and my hormones were like wonky, right? My menses kind of went a little bit longer. That very first sauna was like a godsend to me. I came out of the sauna and I went to the bathroom. My husband's like, you are disgusting. You reek. I'm like, oh, honey, tell me how you really feel. Like, don't hold back. But because I was detoxing and I wasn't doing anything, and then I was like, oh my gosh, perimenopause. Yes, I have injuries. So of course there's toxic buildup and I couldn't do anything with it. When I was injured, it exasperated because I couldn't do anything. And it made my peri even worse. Bam. I'm like, oh, look at me. I'm a genius. But I'm like still going through the symptoms.
No, and that's exactly it. I always say in the beginning, think of these hormones as whole body hormones. For so long, up until I would say even a decade ago, we really thought the only difference between us and men was that the parts that were covered by the bikini, it's called bikini medicine, and that these hormones didn't do anything else. And that's why we're always told that hormonal birth control, there's no side effects. You don't gain weight on hormonal birth control. This is, you think about all the things that we are told, and you're like, that doesn't even make sense. Like even synthetic hormones are eliciting responses to receptor sites all over the body. We know that these hormones are regulating the brain, the immune system, muscle, bone, it's helping with microbiome diversity. We're talking metabolic health, blood sugar regulation, water retention, all of it. And so when we start to lose that protective shield, and it's not, again, this isn't a gradual decline. This isn't a slow bow out. This is erratic chaos. One day hormones show up, the next day they don't. And it's just all over the place. And when the body has been used to these hormones rhythmically binding to receptor sites in a very consistent manner for 25 to 30 plus years, and then all of a sudden they're just doing whatever they want or they're not showing up to the party. Basically, what often happens for women is many times we are keeping some things under control. We're managing symptoms. And it's fine as long as our hormones are doing what we're supposed to do. But then as they start to erratically decline or just start to chaotically bind to receptor sites, all of a sudden, whatever we were managing begins to come up. Or things that we didn't even know about start to present themselves. And so oftentimes women who come into perimenopause, and you think about its average age of peri is around 40 years old. That's a lot of years lived before we get to 40. It's a lot of lifestyle that who knows, maybe we weren't optimizing getting into 40, right? Many of us start cleaning things up, I would say, in our mid 30s, but a lot of us don't, depending on where we're at in our life with family and kids. And so we head into 40. So often we're a little bit insulin resistant. There's already a little bit of inflammation on the scene. We already have a checklist that is longer than the size of our house. As we start to move through this time where everything becomes more destabilized, it's no wonder that often it feels like an exacerbation of the symptoms we're already dealing with, or it can feel like something we've experienced in the past. And that's why it's so hard to nail whether it's perimenopause or not, because you're like, gosh, this feels so familiar. Why is this coming back up again? And it's often because these hormones are declining and we had other things to contend with.
It's kind of like a jerk of the body, right? A lot of women spend most of their time estrogen dominant.
Yes.
And then you
Yes.
go into peri, and as you age through the perimenopause phase, all of a sudden estrogen decides to take a nap. And you're like, what's happening here? Like, I don't need to be estrogen dominant. So a lot of those symptoms go, and then they rev up differently. I just say, stop messing with my sleep, please.
Yes, yes, yes. And even for early peri women, estrogen dominant symptoms are more apparent because as progesterone is declining initially, depending on if you're already coming into peri with a little bit of estrogen dominance or polycystic ovarian syndrome, we're going to see, more of an androgen creep, but also more of an estrogenic creep as well. And so again, a lot of things can impact that perimenopausal journey. each and every one of us are going to be very individual. I remember having the worst of my estrogen dominant symptoms in my mid to late 30s. And then I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's at the time as well. I took a year to clear all that up, to get pregnant. And then got pregnant. And on the other side of pregnancy, I wouldn't say that I've ever been estrogenic. I may have been okay with a little bit of estrogen dominance in my 40s, but no, that was in my 30s. And now I wear an estrogen patch because I'm trying to maintain some level of estrogen in my system. So there's that.
So for women that, maybe you're coming up to the perimenopause, like maybe me, but you're my age, you're in your mid-30s, you're like, okay, I know it's coming, I'm not there yet. So for those women, let's really define what perimenopause is, the differences between the stages of it.
I love this question so much because this is the number one question I get from my patients and women in my community. Am I in perimenopause? When does it start? What does it look like? I want to quickly reverse engineer menopause because I feel like we all know menopause. So menopause, kind of the average age that we go into menopause is going to be 51 years old. And I would say, ask your mama, when did she go into menopause? That'll give you a good sense of things. Hopefully she didn't have a complete or partial hysterectomy like so many of our mothers did. So you'll actually know when she went into menopause. Now, natural menopause is anywhere between 45 years old and 55 years old. Ideally, it would be nice to be on the latter, like closer to 55. That really shows that we've got some reproductive longevity. The longer that we can hold on to those hormones, the better. So if 45 to 55 is natural menopause, then we know that perimenopause is the transition where the conversation between the ovaries and the brain become disrupted. Think of playing telephone with a bunch of 4 or 5-year-olds and how by the time that message gets back to you, you're like, what? What was that? And so that is what's happening. That HPO axis is becoming more dysfunctional. And as a result, that is throwing off our hormones. So as early as our mid to late 30s, we can start experiencing early perimenopause. Now, I call kind of mid 30s to late 30s either late reproductive years for some of us, meaning hormones are shifting, maybe not to the point where we're feeling full perimenopausal, but by the time women are 41 or 42, that's usually where I see the most of my women are coming to me telling me they don't feel like themselves anymore. So, and that's when 43 was when I was like, mind you, I had a baby at 41, so I was just in postpartum. I could have been in peri, but postpartum was ruling the roost at the time. My mom reports that at around 42 is when she really noticed something wasn't right. Man, it took her another 5 years to finally get support, but 42 is usually when women are like, what is happening? Mind you, I have a feeling that for a couple of years, they were kind of like brushing it off. I mean, I think we're all brushing it off. All of us are like, that low stress tolerance, that's just life. That lack of sleep a little bit, that's just life. Those mood swings, my PMS being a little bit more edgier. I think women have been taught that we're supposed to suffer, that there's a level of suffering that we endure, and that there's a level of us just kind of putting up with life hitting us pretty hard. So I think there's a good couple of years where women, the symptoms are so subtle that it just feels like a tiny exacerbation of everyday life. This is what I tell women, how to identify that you're in perimenopause. One, symptoms. So if symptoms are kind of leveling up, like all of a sudden you're like, wow, I'm feeling more moody. I'm feeling having less stress tolerance. If 100 tabs are open and I can't multitask the same way I used to, that could be the starting signs of perimenopause. Also, if these symptoms are cyclical. So you're okay in the follicular phase. Like I always joke that everybody loves day 12 us. Everybody. Even me. I'm like, sign me up for day 12 me every day of the week. We've all been told not to love day 27 version of us. But in peri, it can start at like day 20 or day 21. Like all of a sudden it starts to stretch. Those PMS symptoms 2 days leading up to your period now are 6 days leading up to your period. So it's worth looking at how are you doing throughout the luteal phase? Are you noticing that the sleep issues are in that phase or that the mood swings are becoming more predominant in that phase? And then also looking at the duration of your cycle. So that luteal phase of your cycle could shorten by a day or two. So you may notice instead of a 29-day cycle, you're looking at 27 days or 26 days. Again, still cycling. Everything's, for the most part, easy to miss. Super easy to miss. Because even during our reproductive years, how often did your cycle change? So it can be, but if you notice like month after month after month, and then the other thing is age. If you're 39 and all of a sudden things are getting wonky, it's again, run the full panels, start looking at your menstrual cycle and your symptoms to start to connect the dots. That's early perimenopause. Late perimenopause is going to be this is like, make it impossible for me to miss. You are skipping periods for over 2 months. This is where periods become erratic. This is where you'll have light spotting one cycle and then crazy heavy bleeding the next. This is where women start to experience anemia and low energy, low mental fatigue and physical fatigue. This is really where hormones begin to decline, and estrogen particularly. So now we're seeing poor sleep. Now we're seeing hot flashes and night sweats and severe anxiety and depression. We're seeing a kind of a ratcheting up of symptoms in late peri. And that's where we often are like, okay, now we can absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, identify that you're in perimenopause. Most likely women have been in it for at least 4 to 5 years prior.
It's a lot to go through as a woman. I think one of the things I hear most often and that I'm really a big advocate for is when women say, my doctor just told me, oh, it's part of being a woman, it's part of getting older, it's part of being a mom. And they go into their medical practitioner asking for these questions, just like, your mom did, and so many of your clients do. But they're told, no, this is just how it is. You just have to suffer like this. But just dispel that myth that you don't have to feel like this.
No. And I will say, I just want to be very transparent because I am doing all the things. And I've got all the tools. I've got all the hormones. I got all the things. And I will tell you, some days, even for me, despite how well I eat in terms of an anti-inflammatory, blood sugar friendly, metabolically healthy diet, how much I sleep, like I treat my sleep like it's $1 million meeting. And yet, one of the symptoms that I really struggled with in perimenopause is going to be migraines. I don't know when I'm going to get one. Every morning I wake up hoping I don't have one. And there are definitely days where my mood is still lower than I would love in the luteal phase of my cycle. And I'm not on the lowest dose of estrogen. I'm on a higher dose of estrogen than the average woman in perimenopause and menopause, mainly for mitigating migraines. I'm on a sexy dose of progesterone too. I'm not going to pretend like I'm not. And so again, when we're talking about a 10-year transition, I always joke that that's not a transition. That's a freaking career. Like, how many times is our business going to change in the next 10 years? You know what I'm saying? Like, we're going to evolve. Who you are is going to evolve. Who you are at the beginning of perimenopause, believe me, girl, is not going to be who you're going to be at the end of perimenopause. You know what I'm saying? And so there's going to be versions of ourselves. There's going to be symptoms that come and go. Some women can have sleep issues for a year and then be good for 4, and then it comes back in year 7. And so that is the inconsistency of perimenopause. And I think 2 things I want every woman to walk away with is, one, there's a level of surrender, right? Because I always say ownership is different than blaming ourselves. We've been taught to blame ourselves. That is not going to get us where we want to go. But ownership in this journey, that is going to set the course and set the tone for how we want to live our lives. There's a surrender. There are days where my body's like, you need to sit down. You need to sit your butt down and just take a minute and chill. I love that we live in a time of bioobservability, because I think a lot of us have been taught to not trust ourselves and not trust our intuition and not listen to our bodies. And I'll be honest with you, there were years, many, 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 many years that I stole from my chronic stress response, my stress response system. I thought it was my slight edge. I was like, oh, I could just tap into these reserves. No, girl, not for long. I could get away with it for so long, and then eventually it came and bit me in the butt. I was brought up not trusting myself and not listening to myself. And so I love that I have technology that can also tell me to sit your butt down on those days where I probably need to rest. And so it's going to be part surrender and part really taking that initiative, like having the habits in place I always call it, I love double dipping. I want to double dip for feeling good and mitigating symptoms today. The things that I'm doing today, I want to know that it's benefiting my future self, my 70-year-old self, my 60-year-old self, my 80-year-old self. And so even with all the information, even with everything that I know, not every day is going to be the most amazing day. And that's just kind of how it's going to play out. So I want women to know that knowledge is power, and be okay if some days you just need to take a moment. You can't go as hard as you used to. And that's why this time, the superpower of perimenopause is discernment. There's going to be a bit of a grieving process because, we are stepping out of our childbearing years. Back in the day, I could just run into the bed and fall asleep. Back in the day, I could get away with 6 hours of sleep and be fine the next day. Back in the day, I could drink wine with my girls on a Friday night and be fine. None of that exists today for me. And so do I mourn that version of me? Sure. And it's a time of discernment where I get, okay, this is my capacity. This is what I have bandwidth for. This is how I'm going to build my life around that discernment, those boundaries, and that capacity. So I think that's really what perimenopause is really prioritizing you and understanding what you have capacity and bandwidth for and build a life around that.
I do have a burning question. What really goes under the radar with most clients when I'm talking to them is the connection between blood sugar, the vaginal microbiome. The vaginal microbiome, I call it, right? Because it almost becomes a different kind of culture. And I don't mean people that are prone to yeast infections, because as people go through perimenopause, they're like, I never had this before. Why do I have this weird feeling? And I always say to them, does it feel like a hue, like something might be starting, but does it really turn into anything? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about your hormones, but let's talk about blood sugar. And also let's talk about that feeding cycle to the vaginal microbiome. So can you talk into that?
Absolutely. I also want to let you know that I believe that every vagina needs estrogen. Every vagina, all vaginas at some point are going to need vaginal estrogen to mitigate any GSM symptoms, genital urinary symptoms of menopause, including UTIs and incontinence. Something a lot of people don't know is that it's recurrent UTIs in the elderly population. So for us that are in our 70s and our 80s, that actually is one of the biggest reasons why women end up needing assisted living. But if we just gave these women vaginal estrogen, it could have changed the game. But I also want to speak into vaginal flora, particularly and the microbiome, the gut microbiome, and how blood glucose. I always think about blood sugar as the ultimate biomarker of our cellular energy. But also we know that if we've got, blood glucose variability, or we have increased blood sugar, that it's going to mess with not every flora in the body, really, even our oral flora. So our microbiome, our vaginal flora, and our oral flora. And it really, we know that if there's some type of dysbiosis, particularly yeast dysbiosis, Candida loves sugar. A lot of microbes love sugar, like they feed off sugar. And that can really disrupt that microbiome, especially if you don't have the estrogen to really support you. And that's really what's happening is as estrogen and progesterone are declining, we lose diversity. That's a big part of this. And that's one of I'm a proponent of a yes and. A lifestyle has to be foundational in how we eat and in meal timing. I love early time restricted eating. I don't really speak into intermittent fasting as much as I am more circadian rhythm meal timing. So you have dinner by 6 o'clock, 7 at the latest. In the book, I say anything past 7 o'clock is late night eating. And the thing about what we know is, just speaking in terms of blood sugar and how that can mess with our sleep and our circadian rhythm. But then also we're talking about, it's disrupting that microbiome. And so I always tell women, ideally end eating by 7 at the latest, so they have 3 hours before bed, and then break your fast in the morning with a savory breakfast, a protein and fiber rich breakfast. That's going to set the tone for your day, so you're not getting on that blood sugar roller coaster. But the benefits of eating in that way and honoring our circadian rhythm are multifold, including supporting all of the flora of our body as well. So that's going to be a big piece. But just know that the reason why things really start to tip the scale, particularly in perimenopause, is going to be that those hormones are not helping to cultivate that same diversity and it changes the pH of our vagina. It changes everything. And that's why I think vaginal estrogen is so important. But yes, I talk about in the two of the biggest pillars of the book. The first two pillars of the book is going to be how to balance your blood sugar, because that is, again, the biggest ultimate biomarker of your cellular longevity and ultimately your overall longevity. And then 2, how do you make metabolically healthy meals that prioritize protein, micronutrient-rich foods, antioxidant-rich foods, omegas, fermented probiotic and prebiotic rich foods, and then mitigates refined ultra-processed foods, right? And alcohol. I'll be honest with you, I'm very real about alcohol. Taking a step back, particularly if you're noticing that it isn't working for you the way that I'm going to argue that alcohol probably never worked for any of us at all, but it really hits hard in perimenopause and beyond. And so just honor that. If your body's not handling it the way that it used to, or you're feeling garbage the next morning, then it's time to be more discerning about when you're drinking and lessen that.
We agree. We also never make friends when we tell them to lay off the wine. I think we all know. I think in the core, we all know it's not great for us.
Gosh, I love wine. I can't tell you how many times I've been to Italy and have done wine tasting all over Italy. Like, I was a bartender for goodness sakes when I was in college. Like, I was an amazing mixologist in San Francisco. Like, it paid my mortgage for goodness sakes. And so, I mean, I could tell you how to do all kinds of things, but it gets to a point where, your hormones begin to slide and your liver isn't metabolizing the way that it used to, and your gut microbiome is just not as robust either. And you just you don't have the ability to process alcohol the way that you used to. And you just have to be real about it. Even today, I'll have like a sip of something, like a sip of champagne or a sip of wine on a special occasion. And anything more than that, will tank my sleep. Like, that's just where I'm at. And that's the reality of it. And here's the thing, again, bioobservability, I can see it on my Whoop. And that's the cool thing about like a company like Whoop, where they have millions of data sets that they can pull from, and they can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that alcohol is doing no one any favors in terms of their sleep, their heart rate variability, their resting heart rate, their overall body recovery. Everything is going to tank. Even if you think you're getting a good night's sleep, you're not. Quality and quantity are very different things.
Now, I got to ask another question because this is, I think, one of the bigger concerns that women have during perimenopause is the weight gain, right? Because you're getting hormone fluctuations. We just talked about the insulin resistance. What are your recommendations for those women that really want to optimize their whole body health and like are a little fearful of the body composition changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for you to know that you are not crazy. A lot of the bro dialogue out there is that women are lazy and it's that their fault. That hormones don't change their metabolic health. And it just makes me so angry. Ask any woman in their 40s what's up. It's women who, weight had never been an issue their whole lives, which, what a rarity. But even those women who step into their 40s and are like, I have not changed anything. We know that these hormones are influencing insulin sensitivity. We know that these hormones are influencing fat storage. They're influencing water retention, inflammation. They are influencing muscle and bone. You're telling me, and they're influencing sleep. All of these things. So whether it's happening, I think it's happening. The research is clear that it's happening directly. That as these hormones are declining, your metabolism is becoming less resilient. But also, as these hormones are declining, you're getting less sleep. As these hormones are declining, you have less workout recovery. As these hormones are declining, you notice less strength and less power in your workouts. All of this is happening, and all of this is impacting your metabolic health. Because depending on, I think we can all remember when we were in our 30s and our 20s, how hard we could push in the gym. And then all of a sudden in our 40s, we're like, okay, I got to think about this a little bit differently. Like, I can't hit it the way that I used to. I got to be more discerning. So what I recommend to women is, number one, let's make sure that you're balancing your blood sugar with your meals and with your meal timing. Because majority of us, as we head into perimenopause, are going to have some level of insulin resistance. We all grew up in the 80s. Okay, I was given Pop-Tarts for breakfast. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of things that I didn't know about when I was a child that I was like, why didn't someone stop me? Like, I remember eating cornflakes, and the sugar had to be so thick at the bottom of the bowl that it was hard to move the spoon. So there were years where I just, my sons never had cereal. Never. I think my sons never even looked at a Pop-Tart, and so I think about thought of the days where, lunch was like little McDonald's sandwich, like hamburgers, for most of us coming into our 40s or into our mid 40s, early 50s have had some level of, the way that we ate probably wasn't balancing and optimizing our blood sugar. And 1 in 5 women are coming into perimenopause with polycystic ovarian syndrome. So there's already a disruption in metabolic health. So by the time we get into this, what I call window of vulnerability, I would say, a great percentage of us are already having some level of metabolic struggle. And so balancing blood sugar is going to be a major player here. And if you want to know what's going on there, I highly recommend putting a continuous glucose monitor on. I just took one off the other day, but I usually have one on the back of my arm. And it just lets me know what are the behaviors that are keeping blood sugar stable? What are the behaviors that are messing with my blood sugar? Particularly, what are the foods that I'm putting in my body that could be disrupting my blood sugar? Ideally, we want gentle rolling hills when we're eating our meals, especially within the 2 hours after that meal. Next, it's going to be being really honest about your calories, like how many liquid calories are there? Those poppies or, your kombuchas, all of these things. I know that they're meant to be healthier versions of things, but that 5 grams of added sugar in a liquid drink, it adds up, especially if you're having a couple of those every single day. So again, getting really honest, that maybe only doing one pump of vanilla in your vanilla latte. Let me tell you, your blood sugar really doesn't distinguish between the one pump or the two pumps or the three pumps. It's all liquid sugar. It's all going to hit you, probably pretty hard. I've looked at so much data on CGMs. Like I've had women who've tried to mess with every Starbucks type of order you could possibly imagine, and even still, they're amazed at how quickly their blood sugar will rise on the back end of a latte. And so those are the things we got to be really honest about. Next, walking after meals is going to be so important, and really probably the through line of what you'll get from the Perimenopause Revolution book is that we really need to build our lives around movement. Build your life around movement. Gone are the days where we can just do a 50-minute workout in the morning and then sit on our butts for the rest of the day. Like it's not working. It's not for our longevity, not for our bone and our muscle. So be sure to be moving throughout the day, all day long. Like I think about the Blue Zone research. These people are not doing power yoga at 6 o'clock in the morning. They are not in a HIIT class. They're not doing CrossFit. They're not even in a gym. They're just moving constantly. They're physically active. And so building your life around that, particularly after meals, like where the juice is worth the squeeze is at least after meals so that you're stabilizing that blood sugar. And then the other tenet that I really emphasize, because 67% of women suffer from this. Chris, it sounds like last night this happened to me. My son woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning. He thought something was crawling on him. They're spraying all over this hotel, like herbicides and pesticides. Like there's nothing. Anyway, he woke up at 2:30 and he was convinced that there was something in the bed. So it woke us up. We had to sit on the couch for a second. Like Alex, my husband, had to sweep the bed like 20 times, make sure there was nothing in the bed. And so finally, my son falls right back asleep. He's 4. It's 2:30. I look at the clock again. I'm still awake. It's 3:45, and I'm like, uh-oh. I mean, that's perimenopause. You know what I'm saying? And so I was like, I'm not going back to sleep, am I? If I don't do something to get myself back to sleep. And so sleep becomes so mission critical. So I'm a big proponent of having good sleep consistency. And what that means, because yes, there's a lot of great sleep aids, including oral micronized progesterone, which is what I pulled out last night in the middle of the night. But I am so solid on my sleep consistency. I'm asleep. I'm like lights are off by 10. I'm up by 6. And I honor that consistency every day. And I have a solid sleep routine. So I recommend, again, if you think that you can just get away with getting into bed after a Netflix show, that it don't work like that anymore. So you have to really honor that sleep process, that sleep routine. I always say treat your sleep routine like it's $1 million meeting. So those are the 3 tenets that are going to help to balance your blood sugar. Last is going to be number 4, lift weights. Please lift weights. And when I say lift heavy, I'm not talking about something crazy. I'm saying it that if you've been going to the gym, girl, lifting those 15 pounds for the last 6 months, pick up the freaking 20s. It's time to pick up the 20s. Okay. You've been working on 8s and 10s, it's time to move to 12s and 15s. Okay. I would say that usually I want you maxing out by rep 10, where you're barely squeaking out that rep. And I'm telling you, those 8s, they ain't doing it for you anymore. So we need to just ramp up the weights a little bit more. And you don't need to be in the gym for 15 minutes to do this. You can get a good workout done in 20 to 30 minutes. Just be intentional. And I would say, do your best to be in the gym or even in your home. I work out at home all the time, 20 to 30 minutes, 2 to 3 times a week. So you are protecting and building that muscle, that organ of longevity, and you are bashing those bones. So you're protecting your bones.
And I think what's really great is for people that are listening are like, oh my gosh, I need to go back and re-listen. I need to write it all down. Good news, Dr. Mariza wrote it all down in her new book. Yeah, and when this episode's airing, it's actually November, so your book is out, so they can go get it. So tell us a little bit about what they're gonna find in the perimenopause revolution.
I love it. So I got the book right here. If you're watching this on YouTube or wherever, it's right here. And 3 things you're going to get from the book. Number 1 is you're going to know if you're in perimenopause and you're going to understand what is happening to your body in perimenopause. No more being gaslit and dismissed about what is going on with your body. Knowledge is power. Number 2, you're going to be able to connect the dots between your symptoms and your future health outcomes. Some of these symptoms, these are signals. This is your body letting you know that we need a new level of support and care. And we have to listen. So if you're feeling low energy, if you're noticing the belly fat, this isn't just, hey, this is going to go away when you get into menopause. That's not how it works. Like it's a continuum. There is not like one day in time, perimenopause chaos is over. No, the silent shifts are going to keep on coming. So it's important to know that. Number 3 is the pillars. Where again, balancing blood sugar, movement, exercise snacks, sleep routine, circadian rhythm optimization, community, mental health, managing your stress response system, all of that, and hormone replacement therapy. All of it's built in. And then there's a 5-week program that puts it all together, including mindset, because this is the most powerful chapter you're walking into. Plus, there's bonuses. And sometimes people only do pre-order bonuses. Why would I ever create bonuses and not give them to you at any given moment? So when you get the book, you're going to get all the bonuses. You just have to go to drmariza.com/book. I've got workout videos, exercise snack videos, I think over 100 recipes, meal plans, lab tracker, symptom tracker, labs to take to your doctor, optimal ranges, so that when they tell you everything is normal, you can look at this lab doc and say, you know what? No, I'm actually heading towards prediabetes. This is not okay. So that's going to give you the truth that you really need. And these labs are based on women, not men. All of this is built into the bonuses and in the book.
Love it. I'm getting the book. Chris is getting the book. Everyone's getting the book. It's like Oprah. Everyone gets a book.
Everybody gets the book.
Everybody gets a book.
The bonuses.
Everybody gets a
I
book.
want when women decide that they are ready to make a change, now is the new later, right? Women are like, now, I'm ready now. I want you to have everything that you need. The number 1 through line for this book, this love letter to you, is that you experience wins. I want you to have a win. I want you to have so many wins that you stay motivated, that you stay excited, and that you stay confident to continue to charter this path for yourself.
I love it. Well, Dr. Mariza, thank you so much for coming in and hanging out with us today. This was such a jam-packed episode. I love your energy. You're just such an awesome person to chat with. So this was phenomenal. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
All right, everybody, check the show notes for the resources because you got links to the book. Don't forget you get that amazing toolkit with it. And you can always go and follow Dr. Mariza on her socials. All of it linked in the show notes. And that's another episode of us here at Keep It Clear. We'll see you next week.